This is our second panel for the college application process. And today we have with us Shikhar.
Hey guys, I'm Shikhar. I'm a rising sophomore at U Chicago now. I plan to major in economics and data science, so that's my background. There were a couple of parameters that went into it. The first one was I'm an international student, so I don't have an American visa. And that meant that I had to be slightly more picky about my college choices. We were looking at slightly larger class groups that historically take in more international students. So I was applying to kind of the more conventional big name universities. So I can give you some examples of university that I didn't apply to because I thought it's kind of too small and I have a lower chance of getting in. And kind of very liberal arts, small Swarthmore, or really kind of niche, small liberal arts colleges. While I would have loved it, I think it would have suited me because I had limited number of applications I could make. I think those were the ones that I chose not to spend my time applying to. Then of course it's like based on your interests. I was interested in economics and to some extent business. So I was looking at location is a factor for many people. It wasn't for me. From my perspective, I'm going 10,000 kilometers away, whether that's to California or to uh, the East Coast. That's okay. So but that's a factor many people take into account. After that, I was just looking at, honestly, the outcomes I would have after college, because we know it's like a big investment for going into the US. So I know a lot of people have a lot more parameters, but for me, I was kind of open towards the college experience I have, also because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted from college. So honestly, I was just trying to not do anything crazy or too special, and just trying to follow kind of pathways other people have laid down. So I was looking at colleges historically TISB students get into. I think we had access to a portal that helped me with that. And generally speaking, I had gone to a college counselor, both in school and one outside. So they helped me with the process too. And I wasn't very, very picky. I never had a dream school growing up or anything like that. So I guess it was a slightly different case for me. Yeah, I had a lot more than 20 initially. So the way you cut down after that is I looked at, so I have a limited number of applications and you have to kind of measure your risk tolerance, so to speak. So um, I don't know the kind of words people use it, but I think it's safety, target, and then a dream school. That's how I went about it. Like very, like three different bands, so to speak. And again, the college application process also, if you really want to maximize it, the first step is really being true to yourself and being real with yourself. Your IB predicted grade, your SAT score, the kind of activities you've done, and so generally, you would know the kind of universities you have a good chance of getting into, and that should really build your risk tolerance to saying, oh, how many dream schools can I apply to, how many target, and how many safety. That was the general plan. I was kind of more bullish about my expectations only because my logic was if I'm going to spend so much, I might as well make the education worth it. And if I didn't get in, then I had a couple of safety options, or I was actually saying that if I don't get into a university of my choice, I'll take a gap year and try again because uh, that's kind of my mindset on this one because I don't want to spend so much money if I'm not going to really get a return on that. So I went about it as like maybe 7 really dream schools. Even within that, I made like a category of like super dream within that. But I think I went with 7 or 8 dream schools. The rest were target schools with one safety school, I think. Even that, I had applied to both the US and the UK. So I'd already got into a couple of UK colleges while I was making my US list. Uh, Plus, I also had applied to a lot of those applications where you apply to a bunch of colleges within it. So the UK college system allowed me to apply to 5. And I think the Berkeley, California, the UC system allowed me to apply to a few. So I was quite confident of getting into one of those. But I would just say divide it up into those brackets and be really true to yourself and look at like data and talk to college counselors and really listen to them. Uh, Another piece of advice I would give you on this is that I guess we're going to talk about this soon, but I could just bring it up now, which is when you're looking at your college applications, always try and my advice would be try and apply to one college within each of these tiers that I mentioned, or however you describe them, early in your application cycle, if possible. So this is kind of something that really helped me, but just by luck, which was that I applied to a dream school of mine for ED1, and then I'd applied to a target school for me, which was UMich, and I really loved the school. And UMich had an early application, and I applied to that, and I'd applied to my ED1. And so uh, I didn't get into my ED1, I got deferred, but I did get into my EA, which was UMich. Now suddenly I have my target school in hand. So what I decided to do was, hey, I have about 10 more applications. Instead of applying to all the other target schools that I thought were on the same level as UMich, I removed all of them and added more dream and super dream schools. And that helped me to like leverage my possibilities of getting into a better school. So that's the kind of game you can play. Also, more than that, if you apply to say a safety target and like a dream or whatever early on, and say you just get into your safety, trust me, that's a huge stress out. Like you can really like breathe free and stuff like that. Like you'll it can be kind of challenging time if you're not strong mentally, where you'll have your friends getting into a lot of dream colleges, and you do have to recognize that the process isn't very clear, transparent, so to speak. It can have a lot of like question marks. So just getting into a safety early on can just calm you down and hopefully help you in your essays and stuff like that. So that's one important piece of advice I'd have.
I think it's extremely important because again, like it can be really really bad for your mental health if literally everybody around you is getting into colleges and you have to wait till the end of March to get your results. And
Literally.
even if you get the result that you want at the end of the month, like at the end of March, you're like missing out on like on 3 months where you could be enjoying yourself and enjoying school. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
So again, I'll be honest. So I never, when I was making my college list, it was a lot more about looking at post-college outcomes and general like brand name recognition. Again, because my two main criteria were actually just getting into a college, and I was going to do that by applying to slightly larger schools, so to speak. And my second one was really trying to get a return on that huge investment. So those were my main two criteria. So I never like applied to a college because I saw a club I really liked and things like that. In general, my view is that there are differences between colleges in the US, but personally, I am someone who didn't know what I wanted out of college. And I just wanted a community like I had in TISB that I could really gel with. And I'm quite confident that I would have been able to establish that in most schools because um, I wasn't too picky about it. But so I again was just focusing on those two criteria in particular. However, I could talk to you about other criteria I know my friends have used,
Sounds
and
great.
that would be like a better way. So I know a lot of people are really, really particular about the weather, and I totally get it now. I never experienced anything other than Bangalore, so I didn't have that reference. But yeah, like do you want to go to the Midwest and have really cold winters and gloomy weather? I get it if you don't. Like I look at it as a learning experience. I've started to enjoy it, and personally, I think it uh, opens opportunities to a lot of different places that you wouldn't go then because after college. Because if you have that kind of filter, then you'll always want to stay in a place with good weather. I don't know how sustainable that is, but that is something people look really deep into. Other things people look into is just your area of study. So like economics for me, like look, if I look at the college right now, U Chicago, it's really, really good at economics. It's really world renowned. And so that's what attracted me, right? But it doesn't have an engineering department. So you do need to know like the basic stuff where like, hey, U Chicago is a great name, and you'll do all your research, but you're like, hey, I'm interested in engineering, and they don't have an engineering department. So, you need to look at those kind of things. You also have to look also a little bit about like I wanted to have a liberal arts kind of education where I was going to do economics, but hopefully study a lot of other things. Uh, so I did not want to apply to a business school. I don't think it makes sense personally at undergrad to study business. So, but if you are interested in business schools, then that completely shifts the entire narrative, so to speak, because the schools that are really good at business and have big undergraduate enrollment are limited. So then you get narrowed down into that. So you have to look into that. Some people want to go to bigger cities. I totally get that, and I would actually highly recommend that now. I didn't think about it back then, but I think the opportunities you can leverage being in a bigger city is huge. Like I live in Chicago, which is probably just like the third or fourth biggest city in the US right now, but it's still like a lot of opportunities that I have over there. So some people would like to live in that like bigger city area. Another thing is some people really look for like a campus culture or like a campus feel to their college experience. That's definitely me. So there were a lot of universities that I deemed that were really great, but just didn't have that campus feel that I was looking for, where I wanted to live in a dorm throughout. I wanted to have like kind of the same areas I walked through and just have that feeling for 4 years, not like live in the middle of a city alone and just going to college and coming back. So uh, those are a couple of opportunities. And then I guess there's another thing between like state school and private school. I don't know how people really look into it, but I know state schools are obligated to take in more international students than uh, private schools are. So that's an opportunity. And they're, of course, funded by the government and stuff. They're usually larger, which is bad and good depending on how you look at it. So that's another thing people use. Of course, if you're going more niche into, say, medicine or something like that, then you need to go to a school which has research capabilities. So you need to figure that out and like do a lot more research into details about that. But luckily, I was going into like pretty much every school as an economics major, right? So uh, I didn't have to worry too much about that. But those are like the general variables that I've heard. And of course, uh, all of this gets filtered through the whole target, dream, and safety lens, where you look at like application acceptance rates and things like that. So again, this is really tailored to like individuals, but I'll just give you a really general answer. For most people, I would suggest that EDs and EAs are the best time to try and apply to colleges. If you can try and maximize your chances of getting in that early cycle, I highly recommend it. I can first start off with the exceptions to that, because I think it's quite obvious why I would recommend that. You get in early, you don't have to write more applications, you've got into the thing you wanted, you can enjoy the senior year, a lot of advantages. So why would you not want to leverage that? One would be, say you're deciding between the UK and the US, right? Say your heart is really saying, I want to go to Cambridge or Oxford, okay? Now, it's tough for you to ED, which is like, for people not who don't know, it's legally binding. If you get into a college that's early decision and you apply to them and you get in, you have to go. You don't have a choice. So say you really want to go to Cambridge or Oxford, which I totally get. Like I was one of them. But I decided that if I got into my ED1, that would be okay with leaving that opportunity because I got in. So that's a decision I made, but you have to decide. So if you really uh, want to get into, like, say, a big UK college, then maybe not apply ED and apply EA or RD, I guess, regular, because you don't want to, put yourself into a situation where you have to do something when you really wanted it something else. So that's one scenario. Um, Other than that, I guess there's a scenario of like you still don't know what you're doing when you're applying to ED, so you don't want to commit to one thing. I understand that logically, but I would still highly, highly recommend that, if you are applying to EDs in October and your RDs in December, that's not a lot of time. So if you don't know what you're doing in October, you're not gonna really know, oh yeah, this is my passion in December. So uh, I don't really see the benefit of waiting those couple of months versus the benefit of like a higher acceptance rate if you apply early with the legally binding aspect. So that is something people use, but I highly discourage that. I think if you're not sure what you want to do by October, you won't be sure by December. So you should then apply to like a liberal arts college as ED1. I don't see any benefit you gain by not doing it, so to speak. personally, again, I'm really for this early application process. I think it really, really helps. The kind of drawbacks are sometimes when you write a lot of essays and get a few decisions, you learn a lot. So like after I didn't get into my ED1 and I like reflected on that, I learned a lot of places where I went wrong and I like corrected all of that. And then when I did, I got into the first college I applied to after ED1. So that was a process. If I applied to too many colleges early, then I wouldn't have had that chance to learn from the mistakes because they would have been all my actual applications. So I would say apply to a limited number. Don't apply to all of them. Like apply to 3 or 4, and I think that's what works.
And do you have any thoughts on like ED2, which is also
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
I think a separate thing of its own, and it's not talked about too much because not too many colleges offer
right,
it. Yeah,
right. So just for background, I did apply for ED2 and I got into my ED2 college. So
and you're
that's
going to your ED2
and I'm going to
college.
my ED2 college because
Yes.
I'm legally binded to. But yeah, and I loved it. I was really, really happy. So I had a really good college application process. But so just background on ED2 is most people recognize what ED1 is. You apply early October 1st or 31st, something like that. And if you get in, you have to go. If you don't get into that college, or if you just don't want to apply ED1 for whatever reason, then you can apply ED2, which happens around January or February, where like you say, hey, again, if I get into your college, I'm committing to coming for sure. There are fewer colleges that offer ED2 than ED1. And so you need to really have done your research and know kind of where you want to go. And again, I highly recommend early decisions in general. I guess the biggest disadvantage of ED2 is that uh, you have to write all your applications
Uh,
even though you're sending it in. So, because it's too late for you to just apply to that and hope,
hmm.
because you won't be able to meet the deadlines of your other application. So, I had to do all 13 applications, and I didn't really get the result for like 11 of them or whatever, right? Because I have to resend all of my applications after I get in. So, looking back, a lot of hours went to waste in that way. But again, like, I'm going to be studying for 4 years. So, a
Yeah,
couple of weeks here and there is okay. But
yeah.
I guess that's like the biggest drawback, but it's okay. Um, I really don't know too much else to give advice on. I just highly encourage it. But of course, you have to be sure you'll be happy there. So
Yeah.
don't apply ED unless you'll be sure you'll be happy. But I think you should be sure by October 1st where you would be happy, because you should try and start your college research early enough that you know one college you'll be happy in by October. I personally believe that. I guess I have a philosophy on like this essay writing part of college. So again, what I say isn't the gospel truth. It's just my perspective. But uh, what I believe is that a college application is really trying to maximize like the real estate they give you, which is like the spaces you can talk about yourself. So a lot of colleges have, there are two different types of essays. One is your Common App essay, which you write in your common application that goes to all your colleges, and others are like college specific essays. Talking about the Common App essay, um, I guess this is like quite important because it goes to all your colleges. I would suggest talk about something that's most meaningful to you. They have a bunch of prompts that were given there. I personally wrote mine about Vivum, and like my role in that and how much it meant to me. I was going to write it about my just like my general high school experience, not like a particular event. But I know people who've done really, really unique things and shown like their creativity. So I think that's something you should really start thinking about by the summer or maybe the late summer. Just thinking about an idea, at least if you don't write it down. But so that's something you should give the most time to. I personally thought my Common App essay was good, but wasn't the strongest part about my application. So if I went back and did it, I would have started a little bit earlier. And uh, I was happy with it by the end, but it wasn't the best part of my application for sure. So uh, that's the common application side. You should definitely give it a lot of emphasis that everyone gets it, et cetera, et cetera. I think I have more uh, perspective on like the college specific essays. So there are a bunch of college specific essays that keep showing up. Okay. They're like the why college essays, and then maybe like why economics or whatever, like why your subject area kind of questions.
And U Chicago has also weird prompts, right?
Yeah, I'll get to that. But some colleges also have like out of the box, like U
Yeah.
Chicago has this thing called the uncommon application. So you have to write an essay of like 1,000 words on like if red is green, then what's blue or something
Mm,
like something like completely out of the box. So my U Chicago essay was like a love letter to a bike,
good.
like a motorbike. So,
Great.
and that's considered like people are like, oh, I mean, that's quite regular, people inventing like chemicals and words and
Yeah.
but I would say that's like definitely a unique college application. Like most of them are slightly more uh, normal, like pretty much. So yeah, just about the college essays in particular, I think that's the biggest learning I had from my ED1 application down to like my ED2 and what I believe is the reason I got into my college. So like the Y college essay, I used to write it when I first applied as I wanted to get into this college because of the great professors, and I named a few here, and then economics, and then I named like a couple of like clubs or something, and then it was kind of all over the place. I mentioned badminton somewhere, and then so there was no like real story, so to speak. I just kind of viewed it as a demonstration of my research, which it is. However, I think the way you can stand out in that is by trying to have like a mission statement when you start that Y college essay.
Mm,
So just to give a background, like when I applied to college, at least, I wanted to present myself as like a development economist. And I'd done a lot of things in around Bangalore that kind of backed that up. So when I applied to my ED1 college, I didn't kind of, I just wrote it as like, hey, I want to get in with the great professors and I'm interested in this and that and this. And it was all over the place. When I applied to the rest of the colleges, I said, I want to apply to U Chicago because I believe the resources provided me would help me become a development economist. I will help me like help these countries. Of course, I shaped it much better than that, but that was my first two sentences. And then the rest of the Y college essay was specific research on how that college will help me become a development economist. So I was talking about like this cohort and this club specializes in development economics, and this is why I want to do it. This professor wrote this book on development economics, and that's why I want to go there. This like RSO is doing this in development economics. This class is going to do this. Like it became hyper specialized on development economics. I think that really helped me showcase my research because you think you're doing a lot of research when you go to their website and they say, oh, we have 25 Nobel laureates, and then you write that in your essay. But that's not a real research. What real research is like going into like the second page of Google and trying to find something that maybe other people would have missed, or hopefully talking to some alum there. Of course, you can't do this for every college, but really figure out one thing. You don't have to do this when you get into college. You don't. I'm not studying development economics right now. But when you apply, I highly suggest look at your activities, or better, decide what you want to specialize in and then make your activities so that they specialize into that. But if you're thinking about this later, then look at your activities, find like a common theme or like a couple of things that links to one big idea, and say, I want to study this at your college, and these are the reasons why. And then you can really tailor that to like that college in particular, and it really differentiates you from other people. So that's personally how I went about it. And that helped me kind of have really different essays for every college I applied to without really having to create like a different structure to each essay. Each essay had the same structure, where I talked about development economics and I would mention a professor and I'd mention this and I'd mention a club but it's just different each time because each university offers development economics in a different way. So that's my main advice with the Y college essays. Try and put a mission statement saying, hey, I want to become this at your university. And these are the resources you offer me, which make it unbelievable opportunity for me. So that's how I looked at it.
yeah.
Other than that, in general, a lot of colleges have a lot of college specific essays, like why college, and just a general college question and a general like write about any topic you'd like. So a lot of people get confused about what they should write in these kind of things because they have so many options. So how I look at it is, again, it's real estate. It's just trying to maximize like the space they're giving you. So every time you send a college application, you should note down like four of the most cool things you've done and you want colleges to know about, and write those down. So A, B, C, D. Then go like, okay, my common app covers A. My Y college essay covers B. I have two more essays, and like the topics are quite vague, but I should try and tailor that to this topic. So that's how I did it for U Chicago. So like I had all my essays done, and then I had to come up with my why, the uncommon essay, the one that like really freaks people out or people really enjoy, depending on who you are. But so I didn't know what to do, but I said, why am I like trying to think so much? Let's just figure out what I haven't mentioned out of the things I want to, and find a way to tailor that essay to that. So that's in general how I went about it. And I think I would highly recommend that, because what ends up happening then is if you don't have that plan, you either have an essay that are like the exact same or like cover the same topics, which you shouldn't do, or sorry, just in general, try not to repeat yourself too much.
They know what's on their website, right? I think it's really important to like make it seem like everything that you've done from whether it's eighth grade or ninth grade or even 10th grade is leading up because you were meant to be at this college. I think like, and I think it's, that sounds like it's like very pandering, but that is what it is. And like I think that's like a really really good way to look at it.
So I personally feel like the IB is great, and the main learning outcome you have from the IB is you learn how to cope with failure. You don't face that in IG as much as you do in IB. Just the number of exams, the difficulty of them are just higher. So you will fail at some point during the IB. I mean, I don't mean like an F in your report card, just you wouldn't meet your goals at some point. So, uh, and what IB helps you do is actually really learn from that and try and get a positive experience out of it. And that's really difficult. So just to give you background, my college application process, I faced all of that. So I got deferred, which is very close to a rejection in ED1. So I had to face that. I didn't get into Cambridge, which was something that came out in maybe early January, late January, maybe. So I didn't get into my first two colleges. I got into an EA, that was University of Michigan. I was still hoping to do better than that, but I was really happy. But I was looking to try and apply to other colleges. It's tough, man. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for anyone. It's definitely a tough process. What you need to keep in mind is that it is just a random. There's no, if your friend gets in and you don't, it just doesn't mean that they're better than you in any shape or form. Like literally, just to get some background on the college application, it's like maybe they needed a violinist that year, and so they picked a violinist instead of someone who was better at economics. Maybe they missing a sportsman. Maybe they had some quota on like international students. There's just so much. It's like a black box that we'll never truly understand. So just having that perspective throughout your college application process is really, really important. I know that's really tough, but in a way, it's also a really good learning experience. Like looking back, like you still face failures at some level in college once you get in, right? So now I have that perspective of like how I respond to it. So like my way of handling any kind of failure is usually like, a lot of people say, hey, don't worry about it. I usually take a couple of hours and say like, I'm going to just do all my worrying within these, not worrying, but like any, however upset I am. So I just like take a couple of hours, like probably go to my roof and just chill and like lie down or like call someone or whatever. And once I'm through that or like whatever I feel, then I really reflect on like, how could I improve? And you have to then fuel all your energy into trying to improve in the future. So that's the best I can give you. Couple of uh, good things you can do is that if you believe that getting a rejection would hurt you a lot, which I think would hurt a lot of people, try and write all your regular decision essays before you apply to your early decision, or actually no, before you get your results for your early decision. So like your results for your early decision come out like mid-November, I think. I don't know anymore, but try and write your regular decision applications as much as possible before that. So you're not mentally in a different place. You should try and be as positive as you can be. And other than that, you have to recognize that it works out in the end. You just need to have that faith. You're applying to like a lot of different colleges, 13 different ones, and law of averages, you'll get that in the end. And you have to like have some faith on that. But yeah, it is definitely a learning experience. So I can't tell you that I was just brilliant at it. I did go through ups and downs, but I did have that faith that I had worked really, really hard and that somewhere that would come through. And I was generally really good at fueling that kind of, maybe not anger, but disappointment towards something that could be productive and helped me. Whether that was saying like, hey, okay, how can I make my uh, deferment update really special, and trying to get like a recommendation from the principal, or just trying to fuel that disappointment in a way that really benefits me. And I think that's something that you should learn like for the rest of your life, right? Like, because you're always going to face disappointment. So that's my advice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a super difficult process, and like looking back on it, especially when it comes, I don't know how big like it's not something that this is not something that you like rarely talk about in college, but like I know that a couple of times when I was going to like their admitted students days, or I was just like after I got in, you get it like you a lot of the times you get to meet these admissions counselors, and very realistically they set aside like maybe like for a small college it would be maybe like 6 to 8 people for the international student body population, and then they divide it into regions, and I think they switch the regions every year, but that's how it works. And with like obviously like usually the way it's done is that like whatever for each region the person will have to go through the applications, they make a decision, like they make a certain decision on their end, like I think weeding out some people, and then they take it to everybody else and they present it and then they decide. But you have to understand that realistically it is just like maybe like 1 to 10 people's opinion on you, and that it's really a lot of it is based on luck. And
Totally.
yeah, I think that's something that's important to keep in mind, but no doubt it's like a really difficult process.
I mean, I'd also mention that like I believe there's some responsibility on those who do get in to try and like keep an eye on your friends and just keep their morale
Mhm.
up and like help out. So I remember
Yeah,
like I had a lot of friends who got in early on,
yeah,
and of course the ISB doesn't stop, right? We still had an MUN, we still had extended essay stuff to do, and so some of them really did step up and took like responsibility and like helped me out with just maybe I had something I had to do for like head bar or something, and I'd say like, yeah, are you free? And they would just do the whole thing because they knew that they're in a much better headspace
yeah.
right now. So I do suggest that if you do get in early, it's great, but you do have some responsibility still, and like trying to make sure all your friends get in. So that was my thing. I wanted all my friends to get into good colleges. So personally, no, I was quite happy with, I think I did quite a lot of research, and I think I would have been happy in most of those colleges. Uh, just looking back, was there any college I did apply to? Uh, I mean, this isn't like some rule or something, but I, for some reason, a friend of ours didn't like a university they attended themselves, like Duke. And this was really early on, and we were just looking at college lists in general. And for some reason, even my dad was helping me with my college search, and he found a couple of reasons not to like Duke. And we met a couple of people who didn't like it. And for some reason, I personally hadn't heard of, I mean, of course, I'd heard of Duke, but I hadn't known like how good it was, so to speak.
Mhm.
And uh, looking back, it seems like, why would I not apply? Which is
Mhm.
kind of, again, it wouldn't have changed anything because I got in ED2. So it's not going to have like a real effect. But that was something where like I talked to my dad about it recently, and he was like, yeah, I don't know what you were thinking. Uh, but there's always a couple of things. But in general, I think uh, I gave it my best. So after that, you can't really look back too much. So I guess the number one thing was, again, I told you that I was kind of writing that mission statement about development economics. So I did this kind of project where from 10th grade, I was helping like these small neighborhood kirana shops, which are like small mom and pop grocery shops. And we were trying to help them digitize their operations to compete with larger, more well-known grocery stores. One sec. And I'd done a lot. I'd written a research paper on that. I'd done the whole thing. So um, that was number one in the sense that I think it connected um, what I said I wanted to do, at least development economics, really well with like helping my immediate community, and it showed a lot of initiative. So that was number one for me. The second was, I think colleges look for leaders, and I genuinely believe that. So I would always try and link things back to kind of the leadership roles I'd had in high school. The primary one, of course, was being like head boy. So that was something I would mention, probably in my top two.
Hmm.
But again, this is really different from other people. I would suggest, like, mention what you've done for the longest time and
Yeah.
try and, like, if you've been a pianist for 8 years and that's your in your top two. If you've done anything for like a long period of time, that makes it that. Then of course you have to look at things that maybe other people, it can differentiate you at some level. So that's another way to look at it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, if you really talk to someone, they'll know their top two. I think it's harder to find out like what you should put after that than it is to, like, people usually know what the coolest thing they've done is.
Completely agree. I think it's important to show commitment, and also I would say for the sciences and for STEM, I think in general, it's important if you have any research experience, it's important to show that.
I mean, I just had a couple more pieces of advice that I'd written down, so I'll just
Go ahead.
combine that with this question. So, um, how I use time management was quite simple. Of course, I was quite a driven student, no doubt. So by the end of like ninth grade, I'd created like a general timeline of
Mm.
very, maybe 10th grade. I don't want to give myself too much credit, but I had a very general timeline of how things were going to go the next few years. So how you do that is you just write it on a piece of paper and you say, I have my IG boards this June, and then I start the IB then, and I'm going to take these 6 subjects. So these are when my exams are going to be in the IB. And then you stop and say, what do I need? I need a standardized testing. I probably need 2 opportunities at that. You don't want that to coincide with any of your school examination. So essentially, you just start early and create a really well thought through timeline. The opportunities that that gives you is that, A, you're no longer stressed about, oh, I have so much to do, because you know you have the time to do it. So that kind of calms you down. And B, that structured plan gives you a competitive advantage over people who don't have it, because you'll see people writing their SATs like a day after their term twos or some crazy thing like that, and it just doesn't make sense. So uh, create a really robust timeline. I mean, just the big events, your examinations, your standardized testing, your subject stats, your when does college applications start, and uh, really create that timeline early enough, and that's how you really manage your time on a more macro level, not like day to day. Then another thing you should do is, I'm going to take the question as time management as how do you maximize uh, the work you're doing and actually outputting to your college application. What ends up happening for most people, including me, was that I did 15 million things and I mentioned like 6 of them in my college application. So looking back, like, I could have spent a lot of time that I spent doing something actually doing something else and doing much better at that. At the end of the day, colleges are looking for you being really good at few things, not being average at a lot of things. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking at brilliant at a couple of different things. So how I would combat that now is that at the start of 10th grade, find a way to get your hands on a common application. Just uh, I don't know how you'll do it. Maybe ask someone or just download it from online or something. Figure out, just read the questions, and like, you only need 10 things that you can only list 10 things. Let's
Yeah.
stop saying need. So you can only list 10 things in like activities in common app. So you can do 25, but it's limited. So that gives you, and start like penciling down a couple of things you see, and see the amount of space you have to actually write something. You have no space to write anything. You have like very, very few characters. You look at like the extra information you can provide. It's very little. Look at like, just get a common application form, take a day and just say like, okay, there are 10 things, like pencil down a couple of things you're doing right now. Say like, okay, I need 4 more things. And then figure out like, hey, what do I want to do? And say like, I said I want to be a development economist. So find a couple of ways you can fill that up, talk to academic advisors and stuff, but get that output idea, like what you're doing all that work for, you should know early on. A lot of people just do a lot of things and then we figure out how we'll use it for college application. Very normal. I'm not like it's I did it like that. Just that I think a competitive advantage one could have is by actually understanding how you'll use what you're doing. Like I did Trinity for 8 years. I reached like eighth grade. I like went through hell and I like did it. I thought it'll benefit me. It was like the ninth activity I mentioned and like the fifth bullet point I mentioned somewhere. It was a waste of my time. I mean, I loved what I did and I'm glad I did it because I'm a better speaker for it. But I could have done that without having to go through the kind of experience I did. So, I mean, just saying, there are kind of ways where you can better manage your time by actually knowing what you're using that time for. So, once you like create that, get that application early, fill it up, you get a better sense of like where your holes are, and you'll get this automatically. No one will have to tell you. And you can figure out how you can make up for that over the next couple of years. So, that's how I would go about time management. Day to day, I'm sure you have something up on your website that talks about that. And yeah, so I mean, just a general thing about academics in general, you'll, when you get into this application process, you'll find 10 friends doing 10 different things. You'll see Facebook posts, you'll see emails from the principal with some student initiative, you'll see a billion different things. But
Instagram
at
account.
the end of the day, what matters is your academics. You can like I genuinely believe that like spend more time with your academics and less time with like the 10 activities. I'm not saying don't do it, but your academics should, from my perspective, be your number one priority. It's I know people who have really good academics and bad extracurriculars or going to good places. I don't know too many people who have bad academics and great extracurriculars. It's just a worse combination to have. And trust me, if you have a summer after like 11th gets over, you can do a lot more in building up extracurriculars in like a month than you can do in building up like your academics in a month. So in general, try and keep your academics, if your grades are going well and if you can like show an improvement over time, you've your foot into a door into a good university. Now, getting into that great university is what the extracurriculars help with, but academics is number one. It's like a prerequisite. So that's what all your time and energy should go into. About your question in particular, standardized testing. So in the UK, it doesn't really matter. So if you're applying only to the UK, I would say don't waste your time. There are other things you can do to better demonstrate your interest, but now, if you're applying to the US, which is a lot of people, you do have to do a standardized test, whether that's the ACT or the SAT. I did the SAT. I did it for the first time in October of 11th grade, and did for the second time in March of 11th grade. Then I was done. So my advice for that is an SAT isn't in any shape or form a test that demonstrates your intelligence. It just shows how good you are at writing the SAT. It's simply a output of how much time you do in preparing for it. So a lot of people just do the 6 or 10 official tests that they have on their website or whatever. Um, do that, but that's like not even the start. I spent maybe a couple of months just devoting my life to it, and like I improved massively over that time. And so it's just an outcome of practice. Secondly, I think the biggest decision you have to make is whether you want to do the SAT or the ACT. I highly discourage the practice of doing both of them simultaneously and just like devote all of that time into one of them and just try and do really well is my advice. Then if at the end of 11th grade you still haven't been able to get what you want, then maybe it's a time to think about changing. I personally still wouldn't, but that's when you just think about it. Don't like start off 11th grade by doing both the SAT and the ACT. You're just stretching yourself thin. So you need to have that timeline in place where you know you're doing your SATs at the right time for yourself. Don't do it close to a term exam, all of that, because academics matters. Then you have to figure out whether you want to do the SAT or the ACT. Uh, I did the SAT at that time because I did this diagnostic test kind of online and I thought I was better at the SAT. Moreover, the SAT gives you a lot more time. So that was the positive. In hindsight, I was being dumb. I should have done the ACT. ACT gives you a much, in my opinion, right now, I would advise anyone to do the ACT. The SAT curves are more and more erratic. I know really good people who miss a couple of questions and don't get it. Again, this is my view. Please do whatever you want. But uh, so that decision is important. And I guess the people who best know are the people just 1 year above you. I'm still a couple of years now above in terms of grades. So things change really year to year. So when I was doing it, I think I personally made a mistake. I should have done the ACT. Luckily, I did the SAT and it all went well for me. But I know a lot of people who I think could have benefited from having do the ACT instead of the SAT. But choose one and go all out for it. Practice for it. Just find a way to get your hands on a lot of practice material. It's not easy. I got some stuff from a senior, and I also joined this like thing in Balandur where they were doing this tutoring thing. But instead of actually joining the sessions, I just bought like the exam practice from them. I did some stuff like that. So I had a lot. I had like 3 cartons of stuff when I was done.
Yeah.
So it was really bad and it wasn't a great experience, but I got through it. So that's what you have to do, I guess. And then subject stats, you should do 2 in May of 11th grade. There's no better time. No other time is good. And then the October thing in 12th is like whatever you need to cover up. But May of 11th grade is when you've learned all of that stuff. If you're doing physics, you've learned it and it's the best time to do it. So, and those are quite simple, I would say, quite straightforward. So that's how you go about that. You just have to get in a range. You don't have to actually compare yourself to like, oh, I got a 1540, he got a 1530, or anything like that. It's just a range. No one really. SAT is testing that if we set you a goal, can you work hard systematically to reach that goal? That's all it's testing. So, and also you usually do best on your second attempt. So make sure you have at least two real goes at it. And then your third one should be like the October 12th grade, where like your last attempt, where you go all out. But you're under a lot of pressure by then. So uh, try and get it over with in 11th if you can.
I think it's also important to look at universities that are making that do not require the SAT or ACT anymore, because that's an increasing number. But what's even more increasing is universities who make it optional. And whether optional is really optional or not that's another debate. But that is an increasing number of universities, especially if you're flying to Canada or the UK. You don't even need it. So
Sure.
I think context is always like very important.
And I believe if someone's applying right now, it should be optional like pretty much throughout, like during COVID.
Yeah,
Like right now, it's pretty much optional
they,
everywhere, if I'm not wrong. I know U Chicago had SAT, ACE optional, so I know that exists. My
it does.
only
I didn't know at Chicago, but I know like NYU has an optional. I know Boston University has an optional. The University of California system, I don't think they require it anymore because I think they just like abolished it.
got it.
So quite, it's not the small colleges that are abolishing it.
What
It's
I
the
would
big
still
colleges.
suggest is that, like, at least in the short term, you should still, like, the only way you can apply to the US and say, I won't do the ACT, SAT because it's optional, is you've made your college list early enough and you know
Yeah,
that.
true.
So I don't think there'll be too many people in that position. So in general, I would say you should go forward with doing like the standardized tests to the best of your ability. If for whatever reason, life, a lot of things happen, you can't really get it. So if it doesn't work out for you, and when you're making your college list, another variable you should then add is SAT or ACT optional? Because that becomes like, hey, I didn't do that well in SAT. I could have done better, but at least it's not a detriment for me here where it's optional.
Yeah.
Uh,
I just think like it's also perspective is really important. It is for I think a significant part between 11th grade and 12th grade before everything else kicks in, seen as like this big thing that everybody is doing and needs to do well in. And it is important because when you finally reach that point when you're finalizing your list and you're seeing if it's optional or not, I think it's important to keep like the future in mind and like keeping in mind that like even if you don't do well and all your other friends are doing really well, like it's not the end of the world.
Thank you,
Yes,
Shaila, for everything you're doing for these guys. They're going to be really grateful for it when they get into really good colleges. And if anyone needs any help from Shaila or I, feel free to reach out to us on whatever, and we'd be happy to help.
definitely. Yes.
Thank you.